government exists to serve the British people, and this Queen's speech delivers on their priorities. And by strengthening our NHS with the biggest programme of hospital building for a generation, by putting 20,000 more police on the streets, by unlocking the potential of the whole country with new infrastructure, better education and high technology, from gigabit broadband to a new national space strategy, we aim to create a new age of opportunity for the whole country. And as we prepare to get Brexit done by October the 31st, we are setting out now our vision of an open, global, free-trading United Kingdom, a high-wage, low-tax economy with the highest environmental standards, new protections for animal welfare, the best place to invest, the best place to start a business, the best place to start a family and send your kids to school, and without being chauvinistic or disrespectful to anywhere else in the world. In important respects, this country is the greatest place to live and to be. The greatest place on earth. Mr. Speaker, Her Majesty's gracious speech was proposed superbly by my honourable friend, the member for North East Derbyshire, the first Conservative to represent his seat since 1935, when presumably the honourable member opposite departed for Bolsover. And if honourable members are wondering whence my honourable friend derives his passion and his oratorical gifts, it may interest them to know that his aunt was secretary to Arthur Scargill. And I doubt that he shares many of the convictions of the former miners' leader, except one, that we should obey the democratic will of the people and get Brexit done by October the 31st. My honourable friend is also a passionate collector of airline memorabilia. His home is allegedly stocked a museum of airline wash bags, airline socks, and a vast fleet of model planes, including a model Extinction Rebellion protester glued to the roof. And all I can say to my honourable friend is cabin crew doors to automatic and cross-check, because his career is plainly about to take off, and his speech was in the very finest traditions of the House. Mr. Speaker, the Loyal Address was brilliantly seconded by my honourable friend, the member for Truro and Falmouth, who comes, if I can continue with the aeronautical metaphor, from a very different wing of the party. The modern Tory party is a vast and capacious low-carbon plane, by the way, and who has been highly successful as a campaigner for the rights of disabled people. And though she is known for her calm manner and her dulcet tones, when it comes to defending the interests of her native Cornwall or protecting the pasty against the fiscal depredations of former chancellors, she can be as fearsome as any Falmouth seagull going for your chips. And on the most divisive issue in modern Britain, which plagues us to this day, it is well known that she has come down on one side and will not be budged. It is jam first, not cream, on those squads. She is, Mr. Speaker, she is Cornish to her roots, and her speech also was in the best traditions of the House. Mr. Speaker, let me join the right honourable gentleman in paying tribute to the much-loved and greatly missed Paul Flynn, who served his constituents in Newport West for 31 and a half years, a proud and witty Welshman who earned this obituary from Goldie Lookin' Chain, a South Wales rap ensemble straight out of Newport, is what they said. As an MP, he was well respected since 1987, when first elected. Across the parties, Paul was revered, and it's just possible he was born with that beard. Across the floor, far and wide, respected across the political divide, regardless of your own stance, left or right, raise a glass to Paul tonight. Mr. Speaker, I have no ideas as to the political preferences of the band members, Two Hats or Eggsy, but I think the whole House... I think the honourable lady may be right in what she interjects from a secondary position, but I have no doubt that the whole House will agree with their tribute to Paul Flynn. Mr. Speaker, the speeches from my honourable friends from North East Derbyshire and Truro and Falmouth were in the finest traditions of the House, and the speech from the Leader of the Opposition was in the finest tradition of the tergiversating Leader of the Opposition. First he was opposed to no deal, now he seems to be opposed to any deal. First he was in favour of delivering Brexit, now he wants a second referendum. First he wanted an election, actually he wanted an election for quite a long time. Now he'd much rather not. He resembles a Janus, a push-me-pull-you facing both directions at once and yet unable to decide for either. His policy on cake is neither having it nor eating it. And frankly, I fear for his political health, because we can all see the Soviet era expulsions that are taking place in his circle, as one by one his lieutenants are purged, as Lenin purged the associates of poor old Trotsky. And there is Lenin, Mr. Speaker, the veteran fabricator of GLC budgets, as the Shadow Chancellor tightens his icy grip on the Labour Party. The contrast becomes ever starker. We're putting up wages, contrary to what he just said, we're putting up wages with the biggest expansion of the living wage ever seen. They would put up taxes, he would put up taxes. We will control immigration with a points-based system. He wants to, and of course, let me anticipate the point that my honourable friend is going to make, and we will look after the interests of the 3.4 million. They want to abandon immigration controls altogether, to judge by what he has just said. We back our armed services. He sides with their enemies historically. He sides with their enemies, and he has said he would like to disband them. We want to strengthen, and we will strengthen our United Kingdom. He would break it up. And I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. He was just saying there about how his government backs the armed services. He'll be aware that our army is almost 40,000 fewer than it was when the Conservatives came to power. He'll be aware that those people who are serving in our armed forces have seen their wages cut in real terms 7 years in a row. Tell us what he would do for a set of armed forces who he wasn't backing.
Mr. Speaker, I think that he should support a government, and I hope that he will support the government in the divisions that is putting another £2.2 billion into our armed services, increasing spending on our armed services by 2.6%, investing massively in shipbuilding and taking our armed services forward. And as he may know, there will be measures coming forward as a result of this Queen's speech which will do more to protect our armed services. And I give way with pleasure to my honourable friend.
To the Prime Minister for giving way. Defence is linked to foreign policy. Britain is respected around the world for the values it stands up for. One of them is freedom of religion or belief. It is not mentioned in the Queen's speech. Yesterday, parliamentarians from across the House, led by His Royal Highness Prince of Wales, were at the Holy See for the canonisation of Cardinal Newman. Can the Prime Minister confirm that religious freedom will always be a key priority for our government?
I thank my honourable friend for everything he does to promote religious freedom around the world, and I can certainly give him that assurance, and we will stand up for religious freedom in all our doings and in all our foreign policy. I will give way with pleasure to my honourable friend.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for allowing me to intervene on him. I know my right honourable friend really cares about legacy prosecutions and what's happening to soldiers like Dennis Hutchings, but there was no mention in the Queen's speech about looking after our veteran soldiers from Northern Ireland. And I know my right honourable friend intends to do that. So what are we going to do about it? Because it's urgent in the case of Dennis Hutchings.
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and he in fact anticipates a point that I'm about to come to in my remarks. But let me deal with it out of order, and just as it were, Mr. Speaker, and say that we will be bringing forward legislation to protect serving and former serving personnel. And as he will know, the consultation on that matter has just come to an end. Mr. Speaker, I've drawn several important points of distinction between this government and the party led by the Leader of the Opposition. But for our present purposes, perhaps the most immediate is that he wants to dither and delay, whereas we want to get on and deliver Brexit on October the 31st. And I cannot in all conscience believe that is the right way forward for this country. And Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman recently said that he was daunted by the prospect that he might actually become Prime Minister. Well, I have to say that he is not alone in that fear. So is most of the opposition, to judge by their actions, most of the House of Commons, and indeed most of the country. And I can give him this reassurance, this consolation, that I intend to do everything I can to prevent that from happening. I hope very much that in spite of some of our differences, he will support at least some of the measures in the gracious speech. Because at the heart of this speech is an ambitious programme to unite our country with energy and with optimism, but also with the basic common sense of one nation conservatism. Contrary to some of the gloomier things that we heard just now, we have unemployment at the lowest level since 1974. We have inward investment at record highs. We have 700,000 fewer children in workless households than there were in 2010, and we are leading the world in so many sectors of the 21st century, business and technology. And it is because of that economic success, that free market success, and I can see the Shadow Chancellor recoil at the notion of a free market success, like a Transylvanian in the sunlight. That is how we will look after those who look after us and keep us safe. That is how we will spend another £2.2 billion on the armed services, to get to the point the honourable gentleman raises. And yes, as I say, we will bring forward legislation to protect our serving men and women. Of course, I should be very clear. This government understands that no one can escape justice for a crime that they have committed. But we also understand that there should be no unfair prosecution when no new evidence has been produced. And yes, in the same spirit, we will protect our brave police who run towards danger to keep us safe by putting the police covenant into law and by giving them the political support that they need to do their job. And even if that means difficult and intrusive procedures like stop and search, because those procedures save lives. And as we back our police and insist on serious sentencing for serious crimes, and I think it was the Labour Party that instituted automatic early release, this government, this one nation government, also insists. Yes, I'll give way with pleasure. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the leader of the Conservative Party, our Prime Minister, on delivering an excellent Queen's speech, the one of many over the years, I trust. He said rightly to the Leader of the Opposition that there should be no further dithering and delay, and I agree entirely. As we exit the EU on the 31st of October, can he confirm, once and for all, that the immigration bill that his government will bring forward will absolutely and unequivocally enshrine in primary legislation the rights of my mother and father and 3 million other EU nationals?
Minister. Yes, and not only can I give him that absolute and unequivocal guarantee, Mr. Speaker, but I'm delighted to say that 2 million EU nationals in this country have already registered under the EU registration system. And I give way to the honourable gentleman.
The Prime Minister for giving way. Could he give us an assurance that the legislation which he intends to introduce to protect those members of the armed forces, in keeping with his one nation philosophy, will include those who served in Northern Ireland, and he will not be detracted from that by the efforts of the Northern Ireland office, who would try to placate Sinn Féin rather than protect soldiers.
Hear, hear. I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman. I know that he campaigns passionately on this issue, and I merely repeat what I think he would agree with, which is that no one should escape justice for a crime that he or she may have committed. But it cannot be right that people should face unfair prosecutions when no new evidence has been forthcoming, and that applies across the whole of our country. And as I say, this is a one-nation government that insists not only on dealing with crime, but also with the causes of crime, as a former Labour leader once put it, by the way, and in tackling all the causes of mental ill health or alienation in young people. And that's why today we announce a new programme to purge online harms from the internet and to invest massively in youth clubs. And we vow, as One Nation Conservatives, never to abandon anyone, never to write off any young person because they have been in prison, but to help them into work, and by investing in prisons, as we are, to prevent them from becoming academies of crime. And when we tackle crime as One Nation Conservatives, when we tackle the problems of mental ill health, we are doing something for the social justice of the country, because we all know that it is the poorest and the neediest who are disproportionately the victims of crime. And we know that it is the poorest who are most likely to suffer from mental ill health. And so it's our job as a campaigning government to level up investment across the nation. And I'm proud now that we are seeing the biggest programme of investment in the NHS for a generation. In 10 years' time, as a result of decisions that are being taken now, there will be 40 new hospitals. We have fantastic NHS staff. We have fantastic NHS staff, the best in the world. And it's time to give them the funding and the facilities that they deserve. And I'm proud, by the way, members opposite have shouted out about education. I'm proud that we're levelling up with a £14 billion programme of investment in our schools, in our primary and secondary schools, and I hope that they will support that, because we believe that is the best way to create and to spread opportunity more fairly and more uniformly across the country, to give every child a superb education. I give way to Mark.
Can I welcome the Queen's speech and its emphasis on the people's priorities? Is my right honourable friend aware that in my borough of Bexley, people want Brexit done, but then they want a one-nation Conservative government going forward with all the other policies that we've got in the Queen's speech for the benefit of all the people? We don't want to go back to the Labour of the 1970s, which was a failure.
Well, my right honourable friend is completely right, because what we have is a choice between a semi-Marxist opposition that would set this country back decades, if not Marxist, and a one-nation government that understands the vital importance of wealth creation. I give way with pleasure to the honourable lady.
I'm very grateful that the Prime Minister has given way to a woman MP. And will he clarify whether, in the Queen's speech, where there was very little information about the climate change emergency, whether he will give a little bit more detail on what the government will do in relation to this pressing issue which is affecting so many young people and their mental health?
I thank her very much for her question, and she's raising a very good point, because actually at the heart of the Queen's speech is provision for a new independent environmental regulator that will invigilate this government and any government in the future as we achieve our climate change targets. And that is how this country can hope to be carbon neutral, to be net zero by 2050. And that is what we are going to achieve. And that is our programme. I'll give way happily
to the Prime Minister for giving way. He said rightly a moment ago that those who are poorest are hardest hit by crime. Can he explain, therefore, why, having lost 1,120 police officers, the Merseyside force has been told by the Home Office that it's only allowed to recruit 200 more?
Well, I mean, the honourable lady raises a reasonable question, but the answer is that this is the first wave, and there are 7,000. There are 7,000 being recruited this year, or 7,000 or 8,000 being recruited this year, and the volume of applications is, I'm delighted to say, very high. And I believe that our approach is right. I'd like to give way.
I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for giving way, and just to pick up the point on the environment, because the Leader of the Opposition seemed to suggest that there was not much about the environment in this speech. Can the Prime Minister confirm that the UK is leading the world on the environment, leading the world on helping developing countries fight back against climate change, and that in this Queen's speech, which I have in my hand, there are new measures on water quality, on air quality, on committing to reduce emissions, on protecting our wildlife and our plants and our planet.
Well done, Nicky. I'm so grateful to my honourable friend, because she gives me the opportunity to point out that is this government that is doubling spending on climate change to £11.6 billion over the next 5 years. That is a colossal sum, more than any other country. We are leading the world in tackling climate change and setting a blistering pace for our friends and partners across the world. And we are able to do that. We're able to do that, Mr. Speaker, because we support a dynamic free market economy, and that is how we're able to fund education across the country, because we believe that is the best way to create and spread opportunity, and not, as the Right Honourable Gentleman opposite would do, to set out to mutilate that system by banning all fee-paying schools and thereby saddling the taxpayer with a £7 billion bill. We want to give every parent the confidence that comes from properly inspecting schools, and I think it's frankly insane, Mr. Speaker, to scrap Ofsted with no plan to put anything in its place when parents rely on Ofsted to keep their kids safe. And it's because we One Nation Conservatives believe in opportunity that we insist on standards in schools, and we insist on investment, and it's to allow young people to make the most of their education and their talents and to boost the productivity of all the UK that we are embarking on the biggest programme of infrastructure investment for a generation. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman opposite and then to my honourable friend.
I thank him for giving way. In terms of educational opportunities, how does he think young people's opportunities are going to be affected when the aerospace, the chemical industries, Food and Drink Association have written to him saying the manufacturing sector is going to be very badly damaged by his deal, an industry that employs over 1 million people and is worth just under £100 billion to the UK economy each year?
May I respectfully suggest to him that that might be a good reason, if it were true, which it isn't, but it would be a good reason for his party to support a deal in the next few days. And I must say I find it most peculiar that the leader of the Liberal Democrats has been off to see Mr. Barnier in Brussels to beg him not to give this country a deal. A really quite extraordinary state of affairs. We believe in boosting the productivity of every part of this country, including particularly Cheltenham. I give way to
Schools in Cheltenham, and teachers in particular, are doing a fantastic job of driving up standards, whilst at the same time coping with a dramatic increase in the demand for special educational needs. Does the Prime Minister agree that this is a Queen's speech which meets that demand with huge additional investment to allow schools to go as far as their pupils' talents will take them?
Thank you. My honourable friend is entirely right, and that is why there is a massive increase, not just in primary school funding, not just in secondary school funding, but also in SEND funding across the country, giving local people the power to set up special educational needs schools where they desire, and we will fund them and we will support them. I give way happily to my honourable friend.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way, and I know he's visited St Albans and found it fabulous, but my St Albans private schools, one of the oldest in the country, are hugely worried
worried about this grab on their assets that's been proposed by the Leader of the Opposition? Can he give all private schools the reassurance that they're not just the first of the charitable organisations, that their assets are under attack from the gentleman opposite?
Minister. I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and of course that is not the only act of wanton expropriation, theft by the public sector of the private sector that is envisaged. A massive £196 billion programme of nationalisation is what they want to do, the destruction they would wreak on the UK economy. We, by contrast, Mr. Speaker, want to boost the productivity of the whole of the UK with massive investment. Northern Powerhouse Rail. We will do it. We've begun it. We will begin it. We will banish the rattling old Pacer trains. We will invest in roads across the country and fleets of clean, green buses, because we understand that that is the way to create the platform for economic growth. If you have great infrastructure, you have great transport connectivity and gigabit broadband, then you have the environment in which business can flourish. And we need business to flourish, don't we? They don't like business, but we need business to flourish, not just for the tax yield, but because so many solutions to our problems, not least environmental problems, are provided by the free market. By the free market. By capitalism. And if you look at the battery technology in which this country now leads the world, or you look at the designs for wind turbines or solar panels in which this country also lead the world, it isn't government that makes this stuff. Yes, of course, government must lead and create the right fiscal and regulatory framework. But our vision on this side of the House is of a nation full of innovators and entrepreneurs and start-ups. And that is how the green economy will not only take this country forward, that is how we will become carbon neutral by 2050. That is how we'll do it. And that is the point that is understood by proud free market conservatives, including, as the right honourable gentleman was kind enough to point out earlier on in his remarks, including by some of my relatives who joined my crustier relatives, I should say, who joined the protests in the last few days, but understand the vital importance of free market economics for delivering the solutions we need. And what would Labour do, by contrast? They avowedly wish to destroy capitalism. He wants to foment the overthrow of capitalism. Not just that, he wants to whack up taxes on virtually everything from income tax to pensions tax to inheritance tax, the highest corporation tax in Europe they envisage, and a £196 billion programme of renationalisation. And worst of all, I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm most grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way, and I'm listening to his exposition of the merits of free market capitalism. Can he tell me, can he tell the House, when was the transition to this position from his previous position, which was to F business?
Mr. Speaker, the destruction that Labour would do to business is, I think, the single gravest concern that this country faces, far greater than any fears that they may have had about a no deal Brexit. And worst of all, Mr. Speaker, for the certainty of business and for the confidence of business, this opposition, were they ever to obtain power, what would they do? They would simply delay Brexit. And they would delay Brexit with yet more paralysis and pointless procrastination. So I say, Mr. Speaker, I say to the House, let's not wait. We can't wait. Let's get Brexit done so we can take back control of our money, our borders and our laws. Let's get Brexit done so we can regulate differently and better, getting life-saving medicines faster and more cheaply to market for the NHS, galvanising coastal areas with a constellation of new free ports, organising our immigration system ourselves so that we are open to talent, open to scientists. Come on, I will give way to the honourable.
The Prime Minister talks about getting Brexit done, but he really knows that it's a painful journey and not an end point. And why, on that point, has he not included the trade bill to enable this House to scrutinise trade bills that will come week after week after week to this government, and we won't be able to see them, so we'll end up importing hormone-impregnated food, asbestos and the like. Where is the trade bill?
Grateful to the honourable gentleman. I can reassure him by saying that the trade bill is in the Queen's speech, and I hope very much that we can count on his support in voting for any deal that we might secure and in getting Brexit done. Our approach, I give way with pleasure.
I thank the Prime Minister so much for giving way. One of the things that my constituents care deeply about is social care, so I welcome the proposals that he set out in the Queen's speech. Does he agree this is why we must get Brexit done, so we can focus on the needs of the most vulnerable people in society?
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is completely right, and I think there are people in this entire country are yearning for this House to come together, to work together and get Brexit done. And if we can get a deal, I think it will be the will of the people of this country for us to move that deal forward, because that is the way to get on with the priorities of the British people, not just controlling immigration, but also ensuring that we look after the interests of young people growing up in this country, give them the skills and investment that they need to match their talents. And I will give way with pleasure to the right honourable lady, and then to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way. He talks about Brexit, of course, though we all know that whichever way you do Brexit, it's going to reduce jobs and our future prosperity. Is that why there is no mention of HS2B in the Queen's speech? Has he given up? Yes, I know. He's having to ask what HS2B is. That's the line via Toton in my constituency to Leeds that will serve the East Midlands and indeed Yorkshire. Has the government now given up on that vital piece of infrastructure?
Because I'm grateful to my right honourable lady. She knows there is a review going on of HS2, but this is a government that will be conducting the biggest infrastructure revolution of our times, and I suggest that she contains her impatience until the Chancellor unveils his budget on November the 6th, and I give way to my own.
I thank the Prime Minister for giving way. When I was re-elected in the 2017 election, myself and all of the MPs around me, including the Labour MPs, were elected on a very clear pledge to deliver Brexit. So can he assure me that he will not tolerate any of the attempts to get a second referendum? Because a second referendum is about one thing. It's about giving backward on that solemn pledge that we gave in the 2017 election to respect that result.
Mr. Speaker, I concur entirely with my honourable friend. If there could be one thing more divisive, more toxic than the first referendum, it would be a second referendum. Let's get Brexit done. I give way to the father of that.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister. Going back to the very important question raised by the Right Honourable Lady from Roxton, it's very important to our region of the country. He has announced a review of HS2, which I understand, but I hope that he's given no commitments during his leadership election about the future of that project. Will he ensure that that review does carefully consult on the economic impact of the East Midlands, Nottingham, Derbyshire and Leicestershire particularly, if the whole project of the HS2 to Leeds and the developments of Toton were abandoned?
I can certainly give the father of the House exactly that assurance. Mr. Speaker, the objective of Brexit is not just to give business the certainty of concluding this whole affair. It is, of course, to get on, as I say, take back control of our borders, our money, our laws, to enable us to champion our food and farming sectors in the way that we would desire, to alleviate perhaps the unnecessary burdens of bureaucracy that farming sometimes faces in this country. Let's take back control of our fisheries so that Scotland can make proper use of her incredible marine wealth. And I wonder, and I'm delighted to give way to a great campaigner for Scottish fishing.
Right, my friend, for giving way on this very important point, as he's well aware for my constituency. But does he also agree that the new Fisheries Bill will not only bring back the United Kingdom status as an independent coastal state, bring back a fairer deal for our fishermen, but also, as its #1 objective, improve on sustainability of our fisheries policy?
Well, my honourable friend is completely right, and I congratulate him on everything he is doing to advance the cause of Scottish fishing, which is in stark contrast, I may say, to his opponents on the SNP benches. As I never tire of pointing out, their whole policy is to hand back control of Scottish fishing to Brussels. Mr. Speaker, Brexit will bring all sorts of commercial, economic, and also humanitarian objectives. And I think it is very relevant to the concerns of this country that we will be able, for the first time, to ban the exports of live animals, which has offended people in this country for so long. And I wonder whether the right honourable gentleman has even considered that. Those are among the things that we can get done once we get Brexit done. But even before we get Brexit done, Mr. Speaker, let's get on. But I'm going to give way before I come to a juddering conclusion, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to give way to my right honourable friend.
Well, I hesitate to intervene. The Prime Minister and spoil his splendid peroration, except to say this: that Brexit gives the opportunity for us to revisit the issue of the common agricultural policy, which has disadvantaged our farmers and growers for years. Does the Prime Minister agree that we need to make more of our food in this country, and we need to back our farmers?
Well, my right honourable friend has spoken with his customary wisdom, and he's entirely right. That is one of the opportunities that Brexit gives us. But even before we've achieved it, even before we've got Brexit done, let's get on with the proposals, with the measures announced in this Queen's speech. Let's get on with our vision. Let's get on with our vision for a Britain where fairness and balance are at the heart of what we do. A Britain where we fight crime, and demand justice for the victims, but where we also insist, and I agree here, I must say I agree with the right honourable gentleman on this point, where we also insist on rehabilitation of offenders and education in prison. And I'm going to give way for positively the last time.
I'm very grateful because I welcome the Prime Minister's opportunity to revisit the Marxist-style expulsions from the Conservative Party. And whilst doing that, he can perhaps look at moving HS2 out of Edinburgh, where he could save £100 million on the route and invest it in energy efficiency infrastructure projects.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for her intervention. I must direct her back to the answer I gave a moment ago. We are looking very carefully at HS2, and I think she should wait until the review concludes. Mr. Speaker, we have a vision of a balanced and just and fair society where we fight crime but demand justice for victims, where we educate in prison and demand rehabilitation, where we fund superb education and healthcare, not in spite of our belief in the free market. Again, he flinches at the mention of the free market. But because we understand that a dynamic wealth-creating economy is essential to pay for those public goods. That is the vision for the society I believe in. A generous, tolerant, outward-looking and humane society. That is the vision at the core of this Queen's speech, and I commend it to the House.